Jaya Radha. Jaya Gopi Janavala.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Ajnana Swapaditam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Radhastami Sri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagara Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paritam Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sagara Lalita Shri Krishna Tancha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dīnabandhu Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhansi Devi Pranamami Harihi Vanchakotarungyascha Kripasindhubhyaeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, today we have no verse. Instead, we are asked to speak about Radha, because tomorrow is Radhastami, and yesterday we had our Pancharatna spoke very nicely about the qualities and appearance of Srimati Radharani. I'm going to try to do my best. I'm probably the worst person to speak about Radharani. And, I won't be able to give a wonderful, warm discussion like Pancharatna did yesterday. So you're stuck with me, and maybe Krishna will bless that at least I'm active. I can't be effervescent in describing the qualities of Radha. So, the interesting thing is that some of the main points that Pancharatna made yesterday are really, really important to understand, and they're mysterious points. As he mentioned yesterday, and I want to bring it up again today, that the Bhagavatam doesn't mention Radharani at all. Neither does the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll hear about Radha. But we learned yesterday why that is. That if Sukadeva Goswami had mentioned Radha, he would have. What's happening? It's too low. What are you trying to tighten it up? Okay. Okay. So, the reason, of course, is that Sukadeva, if he had mentioned Radha by name, would have gone into ecstasy. And then by the time he came out of ecstasy, the cricket would have been falling dead. So it would not have worked. So he had to only indirectly mention her name. But Radha is very key to understanding of Krishna consciousness, particularly the Gaudiya tradition, because she is the embodiment of Krishna's love, as Pancharatna mentioned yesterday. She is the Hladini, or pleasure Shakti. There are three main Shaktis, the Hladini, Sambit, and Sandini Shakti. The Sandini is the existence potency, the Sambit is the knowledge potency, and the Hladini is the pleasure potency, which is the most important of all three. So, where would anything be without pleasure? If we were just existing and we just had knowledge, what would be the use of that? We all exist because there's pleasure. And it was interesting that he mentioned also yesterday that Krishna and Radha are generally in our Gaudiya tradition. There are those who think of Radha and Krishna as being married, but generally we think of them as not being married, because that adds a dimension to their relationship. And of course, we learn that the highest thing in the spiritual world is the lowest thing in the material world. So usually amorous dealings between unmarrieds are not keeping with the Vedic tradition or protocol of dealings between men and women. But in the spiritual world, it's actually the highest thing. And as we said, that Radha and Krishna are eternally one if they have separated themselves. And then we find even more mysteriously that Radha and Krishna are one and they've separated themselves for the possibility of interaction. Because without being more than one, there's no such thing as relationship or rasa, or for that matter, pastime. It can't happen. So, to expand his enjoyment of Krishna, he's expanded into Radha. And strangely enough, then he again consolidates himself into one as Lord Chaitanya. So, although Radha and Krishna are one, then they're also becoming two for their pastimes, and then becoming one again for Lord Chaitanya, who is Radha and Krishna in one form, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Radharani. So, just as Krishna is the fountainhead of all male expansions of the Supreme, so Radha is the fountainhead of all female expansions. So from her come the three basic categories, gopis, the queens, and the I'll think of it in a minute, but there's consorts. So these are creating various wonderful arrangements. And in these wonderful arrangements, Krishna and Radha enjoy. So there's the pleasure groves in Vrindavan. There is the spiritual world, which we call Goloka, where Krishna and Radha enjoy. But they also enjoy in the material world. And we'll talk about that in a minute, how Radha and Krishna come to the material world. So we find that everything hinges on the word love. And
the word love is defined by Radha herself, that when there's a relationship and it has every reason to break off, but it doesn't break off, then that is the definition of love. That's a very unusual definition of love. The nature is always very interesting, that there are many flavors of interaction between Radha and Krishna, because the gopis themselves are in Madhurya Rasa, which is the most complex of all the rasas. Madhurya Rasa has every kind of interaction that all the other rasas have, but it has some that the others lack. So it's at the very top. And without some interaction, without some, obstacles, without some fire, then the relationship between Radha and Krishna would be sort of not very technicolor. It would be very sort of flat. And of course, Krishna has his Lakshmis, right, or his goddesses of fortune. That's the third kind, goddess of fortune. The queens of Dwarka and the gopis, those are the three categories of female expansions. So he has many goddesses of fortune. He's married to them. And their relationship doesn't have that element to it. So that's what makes the gopis very special. And as we heard yesterday, there's right-wing and left-wing gopis. And that's not that they're, Democrats and Republicans or something like that, but they are, some gopis are very submissive and would never say anything against Krishna, while others will speak harshly to Krishna at times, and we're going to discuss that, so that this adds an element of dynamic. And so even in Krishna's pastimes, there are dynamics, and just as a meal without some spice would be not very interesting. So in the spiritual world, there appear to be some spicy things that happen in the spiritual world. These spicy things are not like they are in the material world, where people are genuinely angry and adverse to one another in a long-term and even sometimes diabolical way. It doesn't happen like that. But there are spicy elements of the interactions even in the spiritual world. So this concept that Radha embodies is love, where she wants to please Krishna. She knows Krishna enough that she can second guess what he wants, and she can do it even before sometimes he can think of it. And the gopis, you might think that they're dressing themselves nicely, and therefore, because they're dressing themselves nicely, they're over-concerned with their bodies. But actually, it isn't so. They understand that Krishna gains pleasure from interacting with them, from touching them, seeing them. So they are dressing themselves just to please Krishna. These things are sometimes hard to grasp, because what goes on in the spiritual world, these interactions, very much seem like the interactions we see in everyday life, in the world around us. But that's where we have to catch ourselves, because as Prabhupada said many times, that there is iron and there's gold. Both are metals, but that's where the resemblance stops. Iron is iron and gold is gold. They're both metals, but they're not the same metal. Gold is very valuable, and iron is valuable too, but not on the same level as gold. So, although externally they look the same, and this is why I think to many people the Chaitanya Charitamrita is so baffling, especially when you first read it. I remember when I first read it, although the words are English, it's been translated from Bengali for our benefit by our founder, Acharya A.C. Bhaktivedanta. So he translated it from Bengali. It's in English. But it's like, although the words are English, the relationships, the way devotees deal with each other are like some completely foreign thing. It takes a while to grasp the vocabulary. It takes a while to grasp why people are acting the way they are, because they are acting on a very high level. Externally, they may do things which seem to us strange, but there's a reason. And once you begin to understand these amazing emotional, and it's not just emotions, it's like high voltage. One time I was with a friend and we were doing some kind of Sankirtan, and we were driving through near the Grand Canyon. And he thought, let's go see the Grand Canyon. So we drove to the Grand Canyon, and I saw the whole thing. And the one thing that amazed me was you're standing at the top and you're looking down, and it's just long ways down. At the very bottom, there's this little river, but you think that whole thing must have been cut by that little river at one point, that at some point that river wasn't little. At some point it was massive. And for it to fill the Grand Canyon, it would have to be even more massive than it was when it cut the Grand Canyon. And that's what I think our emotions are in our everyday dealings. They're like that tiny river that has this huge place that it could fill up, but it in no measure even starts to fill that chasm up, which is obviously there for the water. So love is contrasted from lust by the simple idea that lust only seeks to satisfy oneself through somebody else, whereas love seeks to satisfy somebody else through oneself. So it's a very different concept. And in the material world, we never see pure love. Prabhupada said at one time that we find pure love existing in the material world primarily only between mothers and children. That's the closest thing we have to actual love. Everything else has some level of business relationship, And of course, yes, there is genuine attraction, genuine compassion, et cetera, but it's hard to wash that level out because we are so geared towards seeking pleasure ourselves. So not only is Radha the center of Krishna's love and dealings, but even her Kund is very centered, and we learn about in the nectar of instruction that we have this levels of things. It's interesting, the nectar of instruction I think has something like 18, I don't remember how many? 11 verses. So it has 11 verses. And in 11 verses, it goes from basic Krishna conscious, how to start to become a devotee, toward the highest thing, which is Radha Kund. So it kind of like takes you on a rocket ship in 11 verses from the lowest beginnings of Krishna consciousness to the highest thing. And so Radha Kund, because Radha bathed in it, because Radha created Radha Kund, then Krishna finds it very dear. And he finds it more dear even than his own Kund, Krishna Kund, or Shama Kund it's called. So this is an interesting thing. And today I was reading and learning that there's a pastime which we're going to tell in a little more detail, where Radharani found out through her gopi spies, she has many gopi spies, and they're always seeing what Krishna's up to. And in this one particular case, Krishna was spending time with another gopi named Viraja. And so Viraja was seen by Radharani's spies, and they came back and reported to Radharani that, my dear Radha, you don't know, but Krishna is right now spending time with Viraja. So the whole pastime will be talked about in a minute, but right now we're just going to talk about the fact that Radha thought about that, and she thought, how can I attract Krishna's mind away from Viraja? So she thought and thought, and then she began to manifest a wonderful garden, a wonderful new garden with bees and birds of various kinds, and all kinds of beautiful flowers and plants of every description. And around it, kind of protecting it, is the Ganga and the Jamuna. And she thought, this will be so attractive that Krishna will come here and he will never leave and go anywhere else. Now, some of you probably know what I'm talking about, but maybe some of you don't. So this is a place where Radha felt this will be new, ever new. So this was called Nava Vrindavan, or we call, we turn it into English calling it New Vrindavan. Of course, it's not New Vrindavan in West Virginia. This is Nava Vrindavan. But it's also called Nava Dweep. So Nava Dweep, I always thought the Nava referred to 9, and of course Nava does mean 9. So there are 9 islands in Nava Dweep, and I'd always assumed that was what the name referred to, but Nava also means new. So Nava Dweep is also this special new Vrindavan, where Krishna would be captured by the amazing environment that Radha would create for him. And this would be, something very, very special. So it's interesting that in some Vedic literatures, we have this explanation of Radha's appearance, which you might find strange, because Krishna is eternal, Radha is eternal, and for that matter, even we are eternal, not only going forward, but we've always existed as well. It's not just the Supreme Lord that's eternal, but every one of us is eternal. So how can Radha appear? I mean, in the spiritual world. Of course, Krishna appears apparently in the material world, and Radha appears apparently in the material world. And if we have time, we'll talk about that today too. But in the spiritual world, as far as I can understand it, there's only the appearance of appearances. So the Supreme Lord and his associates, they appear to appear. They don't actually appear because everybody's eternal. So the story is that Krishna was in a place in the spiritual world in Goloka called Rasamandala. And while he was there in Rasamandala, he thought to himself, how could I increase my enjoyment? How could I increase my happiness? And since whenever Krishna thinks of something, he doesn't have to R&D it and then do some prototypes and then, go to a 3D printer or something like that. He, just by thinking about something, it immediately manifests. So from Krishna's left side, immediately a beautiful lady appeared from his left side with a blue sari, and she had blooming eyes and a very beautiful face, and she was very attractive. And as Krishna thought, he looked at her, and she could immediately understand that he wanted to enjoy. So she jumped up and ran to pick some flowers to bring an offer to her Lord, to Krishna. So she was immediately doing that. And so in this particular account, it says that the word Ra comes from Rasa Mandala. So the Ra from Radha comes from Rasa Mandala. And the fact that she was running Davamana, is where the Dha comes from, so Radha. So there's other places where it describes this in a different way, where the concept of Radha comes from. Some cases we hear about it as Aradhanam. Aradhana means to worship. So Radha is the best of the worshipers. So that's another etymology of the name. So in this way, of course, Radha appears, and because she appears, then Radha and Krishna can enjoy. And later on, from Radha expand, as we said, the gopis, and later on the goddesses of fortune and the queens of Dwarka. So these are different other expansions that come from Radha. And in this way, Krishna's enjoyment can happen in many, many different kinds of ways. And a person like me can hear these things, and these are in our literatures, and we wonder, what must this be like? I think about this all the time, that inside we hear these accounts, and I'm convinced that they're true, that these great emotions are there, and these interesting flavors, and these dynamics and things happening. We can hear about them, but we don't understand what kind of intensity that they have. Lord Chaitanya was locked up in the Gambhira because they didn't want him to hurt himself. The devotees in the later pastimes of Lord Chaitanya were afraid because, they would go to sleep and they'd wake up and Lord Chaitanya was gone. And they go, where did he go this time? Did he jump in the ocean? Did he turn into a turtle? Did he, what did he do, this time around? And so after a while, they just had different devotees always there with Bhagavatam or some other scripture, that whatever mood Lord Chaitanya's mind was moving into, they would recite to him, and they would pacify him so he wouldn't do something strange. He wouldn't, sometimes he would rub his face on the wall of the Gambhira. And of course, there were times where he was, of course, the supreme person, so they would have it all locked up. They'd have the windows shuttered and the door bolted, and they knew that he's in there. He was chanting the Maha Mantra, and then they would stop hearing it, and they'd open the doors, and he was gone. Somehow or another, like Houdini, he just got out, Then they'd have to track down where did he go this time, So sometimes they would find him with his arms retracted into his body like a giant turtle. One time they found him in the ocean. A fisherman caught him, and one time, they would have to really do these kinds of things. And the reason, of course, is that a person in deep Krishna consciousness is not just feeling things. They're like a tiny boat in a hurricane on the Atlantic Ocean. They're being tossed about. 1 minute they're feeling separation, another minute they're feeling anger, another minute they're feeling fear, they're feeling that they've lost the supreme. And all these things, Lord Chaitanya would sometimes see a river and think it was Jamuna. He saw the ocean and thought it was the Jamuna. So he would misunderstand what was actually happening. And so in this way we see what these emotions are actually like. Now, if you go on in Krishna consciousness, you won't feel these kind of grandiose emotions, but you may get glimmers of them every once in a while. That shows that this isn't all, we're not just eulogizing or resorting to hyperbole. These things really exist, but it's all in that mysterious world inside that we have to learn how to unlock, that we have to learn how to walk into that internal world where these things actually exist. So when Radha and Krishna are pleased, that's when it will happen. And we can't do it simply by mechanical arrangement. We can do, and we have to do, our elements of sadhana, but ultimately it's up to when Krishna decides that we are purified enough that he will reveal this inner dimension. And then when that happens, it's described as the devotee lives almost 2 lives, one in the material world here and one in the spiritual plane simultaneously, that the devotee is dealing with Radha and Krishna, and at the same time he's here in the material world. And I think this was the origin of the whole thing that would happen when people would take Babaji. They would go sequester themselves somewhere so that they could engage in their relationship with Radha and Krishna. It wouldn't confuse people who were in the everyday world wondering what's going on now, suddenly crying. We have lots of stories about the acharyas doing strange things, like Gaurikishore Das Babaji talking with some people, and suddenly he breaks off the conversation. He's hitting a stick on the ground. He's hitting a stick on the ground because a goat, 100 miles away is eating a tulsi plant. And he's trying to scare the goat away. And of course, the people in the room wonder what's going on, So these kind of things are happening. And, we have these kind of stories. At any rate, I thought that I would continue with the story that I started a little bit earlier, that once, this is how Radha and Krishna, one of the explanations of how Radha and Krishna come from the spiritual world to the earthly plane. That one time Krishna was enjoying with Viraja, which we said before, and the gopis saw that he was enjoying with her, and they went and told Radha, and she became very angry. And she said, let us go see what Krishna is up to now. So the gopis created a chariot that was 100 yojanas high and 10 yojanas in diameter. And it had hundreds of rooms, and those rooms were filled with nice things to eat, nice smells. They had beds, they had all kinds of things for the comfort, and it could move at the speed of the mind. And so very short order, they came to where Krishna was enjoying with Viraja. So as they approached the place, Sridham, who was one of Krishna's cowherd boys, was on guard, and he stopped the chariot and Radha and said, you can't go. And Radha says, who tells me I can't go? And Sridham says, no, you can't go. And the gopis all jump off and say, Sridham, if you don't get out of our way, we will forcibly move you. And so a big sort of, argument started up and made a lot of sound. So Krishna and Viraja heard something going on. They said, uh-oh. So Krishna immediately disappeared, and Viraja turned into a river. And so when Radha finally got there, when she got past Sridham, there was nothing to see. They were all gone. But she knew what had happened. So she became very angry. So later on, when she left, she went back to where she was. She was staying in some house that was made for her. And Krishna decides to go there to try to once again pacify Radha, because she was very angry. And she refused to have Krishna go anywhere nearby. And so she told the gopis, if that Krishna comes here, tell him to go back to whatever gopi he was with. I don't want to see his face. Tell him not to come near here. He's just a lampakta, which is not a very good word in in Bengali. But she's describing him in this way. And meanwhile, Krishna has realized that Viraja has turned into a river. And he's very disturbed by this fact that she's turned into a river. And so he says, my dear Viraja, please come back. I can't live without you, and you are almost as dear to me as Radha, and so on and so forth. He's saying these things. So after his entreaties, Viraja once again turns into a human form from her form as a river. She continues, though, being a river, and she is the river that's practically infinite in size, that circles the demarcation between the spiritual and material plane. But she comes back, and they enjoy a little more. And as they're the product of their enjoyment, then Viraja bears 7 children later on. After 100 celestial years, she bears 7 children. And those children, she's a river, they wind up being oceans. And they are one day, the youngest of them, the littlest one of them, is being teased by his elder brothers. And so Krishna and Viraja are together, and the youngest comes crying to his mother that his older brothers are causing him grief. And so Viraja has to break off her relationship with Krishna to deal with that. Krishna sees that and he disappears. So she becomes so angry that that her child disturbed their relationship, that she curses him to take birth on the earth. And his brothers, because they were causing this ruckus as well, they also have to take birth on earth. And he takes birth in a salty form. And maybe you all can see where this is going. The other brothers take birth in different other forms. And these are those circular ringed oceans in Jambudweep, that we have, First there's a salty ocean, then there's a circular sort of donut-shaped land, then there's a ring of water, then another, then another. These are those rivers they come from, or oceans actually, they're usually called. In Bhumandala, so we have all these various ones, and these become the offspring of Viraja. So, Krishna goes back to Radha, and they tell him, you can't see Radha now. She's angry. She wants you to go away. And she hears him out there. So she's saying nasty things to him from inside the house, that just, why are you coming here? What business have you got here? You evidently find someone more attractive. Just please stay with them, don't bother me anymore. So she's saying like this. And the gopis say, yes, Krishna, I think you should do this. Some of them say, you should probably wait a little bit of time. Others say you should just go away. And others say that maybe you should try to assuage her mind right now. You should go there and say something. And yet others say, if you don't go away right away, we will forcibly drag you away. So all these gopis have different expressions of the way they, relate to what Radha has said, And so Krishna decides that maybe it's best to wait. So he begins to wait for a little while. So this goes on, and while it's happening, Sridham, who is one of Krishna's cowherd boys, is hearing this exchange between Radha and Krishna. It's kind of a not face-to-face exchange. It's a little bit of a long-distance exchange because they're not right next to each other. So he's hearing this, and he begins to think, who does this Radha think she is? This is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Who talks to him like this? He is the source of the entire material and spiritual world. Brahma worships him. All the demigods are following him. And he says, Radha, don't you know? You must know that this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why are you speaking like this? I can't believe that you don't get a grip on yourself. And of course, Sridham's treading in really thin ice, and the ice breaks. So Radha becomes drastically angry at him. She says, you think you know who Krishna is. You know him better than I. You really think you do? So she's very angry at Sridham from having, said these kind of things. He says, I know who your Krishna is, and I don't want to see his face around here. And you always see things from the male point of view. You don't see things from the female point of view. So you always take his side and you think about it from his side and you reject my side. So you are not actually very intelligent, and you are creating a demoniac situation by accusing me. You always accuse me. So I curse you that you take birth in the human earthly plane. So Radha curses Sridham. And then Sridham says, yeah? So you're cursing me and I'm standing up for my Krishna. I curse you. You're acting like a human being that you will take birth in the earth plane as well. And you will take birth in Vrindavan, be known as the wife of Abhimanyu. And you will get the association of Krishna for a short time, and then for 100 years you will be bereft of his association. So we all know this is what actually eventually comes to pass, that eventually, of course, Radha and Krishna will come to the material world, and Krishna will enjoy pastimes for a few years with the gopis, and then because of Kamsa, he will leave for Mathura and never really return to Vrindavan. So that will take place. And actually, Sridham will become Sankachuda, who is a demon. And, there's a whole story there. We won't get into that one. But that will be part of it. Of course, again, I'm cautioning everybody that these are not like the kind of pastimes we have in the material world where people are, unlimitedly nasty to each other and genuinely envious. Without these kind of things, there would be no fire, no spice, no dynamic in the spiritual world. And of course, nobody murders anybody or anything like that. Everybody's coming from the spiritual world. And in the end, everybody is really rallying around Radha and Krishna, who are the center of everything. And as we said, that Radha's an expansion from Krishna's left side, and from her left side is another expansion. So these all go on, as part of the whole system. And I wanted to actually talk about, there are actually 3 stories of how Radha and the gopis come to the material world. And maybe I have time to kind of tell one of them. I'll be running a little over time, but one of them is a little bit long, the others are not so long. That there is a mountain known as Vindhya, the Vindhya Hills. And Vindhya, these mountains are conscious, and so they have a human aspect, just like many other aspects of our world do. There is a physical aspect, and then there is a human aspect, like the sun and the sun god, in this case, a mountain and the personification of the mountain. So Vindhya found that the Himalayas had a child, Himavati. And of course, Himavati is another name for the wife of Shiva. So when Sati was, when she took her own life by burning up in her own mystic fire because her father had insulted her husband, Shiva. When she did that, she didn't want any connection with her father anymore. So she took birth as the daughter of the Himalayas. So when she was born as a daughter of Himalayas, she became known as Himavati. So Vindhya wanted to have a daughter born that was more auspicious even than Himavati. So, Daksha had insulted Sati's husband Shiva, so she gave up her body because she didn't want to be connected with her father anymore with that family line. So she then took birth as the daughter of the Himalayas. So Vindhya did austerities, and he pleased Lord Brahma. And then when he pleased Lord Brahma asked, well, how can I, what can I, benediction can I give you? And so Vindhya said, I would like to have a daughter more auspicious that would become married to someone more auspicious even than the Himalayas. So Brahma said, yes, tatastu, let it be so. So then Brahma got to thinking about it. I said, wait a minute, I may have gotten in over my head here. Now who could possibly be more? And then he thought, there's only one person, the Supreme Lord, has to be the husband of this daughter. So who can that possibly be? So he understood that already Radha was taking birth as the daughter of Vrishabhanu. And Chandravali was taking birth as the daughter of Chandrabhanu. So he thought, yes, this could be it, but somehow I have to connect this with the Vindhya mountain. So somehow he arranged mystically for Vindhya to take these two girls, and they would be born from the Vindhya hills instead of from Kirtida and Vrishabhanu, etc. And so now we go a little bit forward to when Kamsa finally learns that the 8th child has already been born. And not only has the 8th child already been born, but Vasudeva swapped the two children, that now he has the Durga Devi, and Krishna is with Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj in Vrindavan. And so Kamsa grabs the child, which is a girl, and he wants to try to kill the child, but of course he can't. She says, Kamsa, you're a fool. The 8th child has already been born. You can't kill me. I'm your deity. I am Durga Devi. That was actually the person that Kamsa worshipped, was Durga Devi. He was trying to kill her, but she couldn't be killed by him. So she rose into the sky and said, the 8th child has already been born somewhere else. Not only that, but there have been 8 girls that were born that were also very powerful, and they will become involved with this child who will eventually kill you. So Kamsa then thought about it, and he thought, I'll send Putana. Putana will be the right person. So he, subcontracts Putana to find out who will find out where these children are. So he comes to ask Putana to kill the one that's the 8th child, so that he won't be killed by that 8th child. And the girls she should capture and bring them to Kamsa. So Putana, before she gets killed by Krishna, is flying in the sky, and she sees Vindhya and his wife performing the, garban, not the garban, but the various samskaras for the birth of these girls, And so Putana swoops in and grabs both of the girls and flies up into the sky with Chandravali and Radharani. And Vindhya, he thinks, oh, this demon has got my children, and he asks the brahmanas to make some kind of curse so that the demon will die. And so the brahmanas began reciting mantras, and as they're reciting mantras for Putana to be killed, Putana's flying, but she's kind of losing altitude, kind of like, the whirlwind demon, So she's not able to hold both girls, so she drops Chandravali, and Chandravali falls into the river and eventually is picked up. Then eventually she gets so weak that she just crashes to the ground, and that's when Vrishabhanu claims the girl. So that's how Vrishabhanu comes into contact with Radha, and of course that's one story of how she appears, how through all this arrangement, then Vindhya gets a chance to have an auspicious daughter. And at the same time, Radha comes, and of course, eventually, although the curse of the Brahmanas, the mantras of the Brahmanas don't kill Putana, she will be killed very soon by none other than Krishna, and later on when she tries to kill him. So, of course, Kamsa's plans are foiled, but this is how it works. There's a whole nice story about Radha not opening her eyes until she first sees Krishna. We don't have time to tell that because that would take it off. And then there's two other stories about how Radha comes, but we'll leave it there. I guess we'll take if there's anybody that has a particular question about anything that I've gone through, I'm not sure I can answer it because I'm really kind of above my pay grade here talking about Radharani, but I guess we should probably just end anyways. So I thank you all very much for your kind and extended attention. All glories to... Is there the microphone? Give her this microphone then if you're not going to use the other one. So I can splice it into the YouTube. It won't amplify you, but it will make it so that I can use it. You don't have to turn it on. It won't amplify you. It's for recording only. It's not amplification. Who came back? Sridham, yeah. As Sankachuda, there's a whole pastime, how Sankachuda is killed. So, right, okay. Yeah, okay. So, thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Srimati Radharani, whose appearance day it will be tomorrow. And all glories to the divine couple, Shri Radha and Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Yeah, you can just hand it to me. Yeah.